This video is entitled An Introduction to Agile Project Methodologies, focusing on Scrum. This is for the course Project Management for Technology by James Reneau Ph.D. Um, and I'm a professor at Shawnee State University, and I'll take you through this video presentation. In this video, we're going to cover what is Agile Project Management, where is it used, some of the Agile techniques for managing a project. A common feature in many of the Agile techniques, the Kanban, and we'll go into a couple of slides specifically into details of the Scrum Agile methodology. So let's define first what I mean by an agile methodology or an agile project management methodology. So far in this course, we've been talking about the traditional technique for managing projects, the idea of work breakdown structures, decomposing the work, creating network diagrams, um, looking at constraints and all of those kinds of things with the phases. But and that has worked well for lots of projects for a long time. It's a robust way. And if we're going to build a bridge or build a building, build something large, do a large commercial project, um, doing project management the way we've been talking about it works really well. But for some kinds of projects and for some teams and for some items, an agile methodology works better. Let's define an agile methodology, and the definition I'm going to use is Heldman's definition from page 221 of the text. Agile is a highly iterative approach. It's iterative, where requirements can be continually defined and refined. So we don't know all the requirements up front, and they're going to be defined and refined. And this is the trick, based on continuous feedback from the product owner. So basically, we do a little bit, we get feedback, we figure out where we're going, and do a little bit more, and get feedback and figure out where we're going, what we've done right, what we've done wrong, move forward the next step. And you can see that it's an iterative, repetitive, um, and you'll see the word used, a sprint. You'll see that it's a series of sprints a lot of the time. But it all deals with this continuous feedback that we don't get in classic project management methodology. Let's go a little further. In the early days of agile methodologies, as we were just defining them and trying to figure them out, a group of software developers and a group of developers came together and developed something they called the Agile Manifesto. Um, and the Agile Manifesto talks about what we value over what we don't value. And so the Agile Manifesto says that we value individuals and interactions. They're more important than any kind of process or tool. We value, now this was developed by a bunch of software developers originally. So what we value is working software over comprehensive documentation. Get something out there that works, and we'll worry about document. Um, the something else that we value is customer collaboration. We want the customers to be involved in an agile methodology. We want their input immediately rather than negotiating the contracts of exactly what we're going to do over the next several months or years. Um, and in the agile methodology, in the Agile Manifesto, we respond to change over following a plan. We don't know where we're going. We're going to go this way. We're going to head off that way. We're going to see where it leads us. And if it leads us off astray, if it leads us somewhere we're not expecting, that's great. We're not going to follow our plan. We're not going to, uh, that works beautifully. Remember, it says, though, we value. We don't totally disregard processes or documentation or contracting or a plan. We just value individuals and something that works and customer collaboration and responding to change more importantly. In addition to the manifesto, which I've listed, there were 12 guiding principles of the Agile methodology. that they published at the agilemanifesto.org, and the website is here if you want to take a look. It's a really interesting read, but it just blows these ideas up into 12 guiding principles. So whenever we look at an agile manifesto, an agile methodology, think of it in the terms of the manifesto above: individuals and interactions, something that works. Collaborative and responsive are the keywords to any agile methodology. There are several different agile methodologies out there. Different researchers have created different methodologies, but agile methodologies are all about delivering something that works. Um, each of the different methodologies have a place that they excel. Each group can adapt the methodology because it's agile, it's responsive. So you might start Scrum and you may bring in techniques from other areas, and that's great because that's what your team is going to do if they're being agile and being responsive. Um, but some of the most common agile methodologies are the Scrum methodology, the XP methodology, also known as extreme programming. There's a methodology called DevOps that brings development, projects, and operations together into one kind of unified way of thinking about the universe in a software ITIS environment. Um, and there's a agile methodology known as RAD, or rapid application development. There are a whole bunch more, and everybody's creating new ones. There are lots of new ones being created, but the idea is pay attention to the Agile Manifesto and see what they're doing. Now, notice that Agile is all about delivering something that works. If you're building a bridge, you just can't say, well, it works when you throw a bridge up. You've got to go through the process of digging the footers and pouring the foundations and putting in the pilings and engineering it to be able to withstand the wind and the loads and the weather and all of those kinds of things. So, are you going to be able to build a bridge agile? No. Software is typically where agile methodologies are used in developing software because the 80/20 rule applies, and I think that was on the previous slide and I didn't talk about it. The 80/20 rule basically says that 80% of the functionality comes from 20% of the code. So 80% of the use comes from a core in the center of most programs. Stop and think about Microsoft Word. Do you use 80% of the features within Word on most days? No. You use 20%. You use um, let's reverse that. Let's stop and think about all the features. You use 80% of the time, you're using the 20% of the core features. So, what are all the rest of the features there for? Well, they're nice to have. But if we're trying to get something out quickly, write the 20% of the code that does the 80% of the work, and then add what you need to later in an agile kind of let it grow kind of methodology. So, one of the common features that you will find in a lot of agile methodologies, and it's sometimes called something different, but it all really comes, or a lot of this agileness comes from a Japanese word called Kanban. And Kanban is the Japanese word for signboard. Um, the Kanban basically creates a signboard or a website or somewhere where we literally break down all of the work to be done in small packages, work packages, or even smaller units of work. Um, and we put them in a column to do. We then have a column in the middle, usually called doing, and we have a column on the other end of the sheet called done. Each of these items will move from to do to doing to done. There's often another column in there of QA check and then done. So there would be a fourth column between doing and done called QA or assurance or something of that sort. But the idea is by putting this board up where everybody can see it, it improves communication, it increases transparency, it lets the team, not some project manager, not somebody else or an engineer or somebody, it lets the team doing the work try to prioritize what needs to come first and what needs to get done now. This was originally created in the 1940s at Toyota and has really become a huge part of a lot of agile methodologies and a lot of agile teams. It's really based around the idea that the time we spend switching between tasks, of moving from this to this to this to this, is waste. Stop and think about how long it takes you to switch from communicator to listener. Or maybe you're writing a paper and the phone rings, and how long does it take after you hang up the phone to really get back into the groove of working on an academic paper? Think about that time as a waste. It's wasted time, and it's time you'll never get back. The whole idea that we as human beings are multitaskers, "Oh, I'm such a good multitasker, I can do all these things at once." It's a lie. It is an absolute lie. What you really need to do to become as efficient as possible is to put your items and only work on 1 or 2 items at a time. Handle it, get her done, and put it on the done list. Grab an item, get it done, put it on the done list, and you'll find that you're a lot more efficient. So the Kanban is also about reducing the time we waste, huge waste, the time we waste switching from one task to another. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the Scrum methodology specifically. The Scrum methodology comes from the game of rugby. And if you don't know rugby, it's kind of like American football, except there are no pads, no helmets, and it is, let's just say, it is crazy. I mean, it is just insane what you can see on a rugby. What happens though when there's a fight over the ball, where the ball is instead of a toss up like in basketball, where everybody's standing in a circle and the ball gets tossed up, in rugby, everybody gets in a pile and the ball is put under the pile, and everybody just tries to figure out who gets the ball. It's a melee, a fight, a battle. It is really cool. So both teams huddle and fight for the ball. And then once somebody gets the ball, there's a sprint to the goal to make the goal if you can. Um, so the idea of Scrum comes from that idea of everybody getting in the scrummage, getting in the middle of a pile, talking about what we need to do, working together as a team, and then going off and doing your own thing for a day or for a play. The Scrum deals with is broken up into a series of what we call sprints. The project is broken up into sprints, and usually a sprint is short. It's a fixed duration of a 2 week or a 3 week sprint, and we try to always do a 2 or 3 week sprint. And the idea of at the end of each sprint, I'm going to give you a deliverable product. Might not be done, but it's going to work. I'm going to give you something that works every 2 weeks. Give you a tool that works, and 2 weeks later, I'm going to add stuff to it to make it better. And 2 weeks later, we're going to add more stuff to it, and we're going to keep getting rid of the backlog and keep processing and making it better. So let's talk a little bit more about how we do. So, like in a football team, and like in a rugby team, and like in most other teams, there are members of the team and members of the group that are going to get this project done. The first member that I'm going to talk about is someone called the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is not the manager. The Scrum Master is the facilitator. He's kind of like the quarterback. He doesn't manage the play, but he calls the play, and he makes sure that everybody, yeah, he's kind of the one you go to. The Scrum Master coordinates the work within the sprint. The Scrum Master keeps the team members working by protecting them from outside influences and multitasking and waste, So what the Scrum Master does is keep them from getting involved in some of that other stuff. And the Scrum Master is the coordinator between the Scrum team who's actually doing the work and the customers and the product owners. The product owner is the voice of the customer. So at the beginning of each Scrum, the product owner is going to say, well, I like what we did last Scrum. Here's what we need to do for this one, or here's the area I would like, or here are the features I want added. See the product owner. The stakeholders are the people, that's the voice of the customer. The stakeholder are the people that are actually using the product, just as stakeholders were in a traditional methodology. And lastly, the team members are the individuals completing the backlog items. We'll talk about backlog in a second, but they're the players on the field. They're the ones that are actually out there playing the game. They're in the scrum. They're doing it. They're getting dirty. They're throwing the ball. They're making the goals. They're getting the work done. And they're delivering a product at the end of each sprint. Backlog is equivalent to the work breakdowns or the work packages that need to be completed to solve the problem. But because we don't know yet all of them, we just know a few of them at the beginning and learn the rest of them as we progress. That's why we don't call them work packages, we call them the backlog. So typically in a Scrum group, there are three kinds of meetings that we will have. There's the sprint planning meeting, which is the meeting we have before the sprint starts. It's where we sit down and we look at the backlog, which is a list of requirements, functional and non-functional. We break the backlog up into pieces that can be accomplished in a sprint. Makes sense. We review the backlog at the beginning of each sprint so that we can see exactly what we still need to do, what the customer would like, what we've got to do to make this happen. That happens at the beginning of each sprint. Every day, there's a 10 to 15-minute meeting, usually. They're very short, usually a 10-minute, 15-minute, often virtual online, where everybody is sitting around in a meeting room. And you basically go around the room and everybody says, what did they accomplish yesterday? What did you accomplish yesterday? Well, I got this and this and this done. Okay. What are you going to work on today? Well, I'm going to work on this and this today. And then you discuss any impediments that are in your way. For instance, I'm going to work on this today, but I'm still waiting on an answer to this question, guys or gals, or I'm going to work on this, but I'm waiting on something from somebody else, so I'm going to have to put that off a day. I need this done. So it's a time for you all to get together and talk about what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and what stands in your way of your success for the next stand up. And the stand up happens every day. And it's only short, 15, usually 15 minutes or so, as each team member just speaks for a minute or two on what they're doing. The meeting, the third meeting type that you have in a Scrum group is the sprint retrospective meeting. So at the end of each sprint, before we start the kickoff meeting for the next sprint, we sit down and say, okay, what did we complete? How far did we get? This deliverable product, what does it do? What had we planned for it to do at the beginning of the sprint, but it doesn't do? That's important to know. What are we going to do in the next sprint? Makes sense. We're going to score a goal, right? We're going to deliver a product that works. But what are the features? What are the backlog items that it's going to handle? And what lessons did we learn as a team during the last 2 week sprint that are going to make this next 2 week sprint even more efficient? So you can see we're closing the loop by continually looking at what happened, where we're going, and making changes to how we do things based upon our past experience. So we're continually learning, we're continually becoming leaner and meaner and more agile and more responsive to change. That's kind of sprint in a nutshell. That's kind of Scrum in a nutshell. These are the references that I used in creating this presentation. I used Beck's and the rest of his group in the Agile Manifesto. I used Kim Heldman's book, CompTIA Project Plus Study Exam Guide. I used Kanban explained, and there's a link, and I also use the image found on Wikipedia of what a scrum looks like in rugby. This concludes our presentation on Agile methodology, specifically Scrum. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James Reneau Ph.D. You can always contact me at jreneau@shawnee.edu. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, non-commercial, share alike 4.0 international license, and I would like to say thank you for watching.